and welcome back to the Doctors Are In podcast. I'm Reverend Dr. Katie Nix, with me, Reverend Dr. Phil Blackwell. Today's episode is going to be a treat because as we're talking about a merger story, rarely do you get to talk to someone who was there with one church, then came to a second church, and then stayed on at the second church. So I think there's going to be some wonderful stories, if not hopefully some nuggets of wisdom. And so today our guest is Amy Milton, who began as the office manager at Legacy University Church. Then you were at one point the office manager of both churches.
Yes.
And now you have stayed on as what's greater than an office manager? The one who actually runs things here at the new Grace United Methodist Church. So let's start with your point of view from this whole merger, because you got to see a behind the scenes in a very unique setting as we are shuffling through documents and moving furniture. Let's just start there. A, how did you end up not killing anyone, perhaps? And two, what was that like?
Oh, well, the initial question of what university was going to do was asked before the pandemic. It was like, I remember it was in an in-person meeting, which eventually became a nice little time marker.
Yes.
A lot of the discussion happened like during the lockdown when no one was meeting in person, and that accelerated the timeline a bit, but also led to some communication difficulties and just some challenges with, okay, we're all feeling displaced and alienated already, time to make a big change.
Yes.
So, so the process, I found like leadership minutes from like March of 2020, and then the official merger happened in like June, July 2021.
I know that we took the vote for the merger on a specific date in May because it was my birthday. So I'm not saying the date because then you'll know. Yeah.
So it was a long conversation, even though it felt like a very fast process at the same time. A lot of it was doing the pre-work remotely. One reason I didn't kill anyone is something I didn't have the opportunity to. We were all in different rooms.
That's fair. Okay. So making sure if you go through this process, do it remotely or you may lose a...
I think it was more challenges than anything. But also it's like during the pandemic, everyone was reading their email, which is nice. So, that was a good change. So it was like, so a lot of it was done over email. A lot of communication was done over the streams, the worship streams. And it was just trying to make sure that that everyone felt part of the process and and felt connected to it and felt like we had explored all of the options, because it wasn't just merger that was on the table. It was, let's go to a half-time pastor and get just volunteer staff. Do we just shut down fully and make selling our building the conferences problem? It's like, do we do a new church plant? Like what's going on? So it was a long conversation where every topic was evaluated, and we had to figure out how to communicate to people who still somehow weren't connecting online. We sent a bunch of letters. And so much of the pre-process happened that, it's like the vote actually happened in May, and then the merger wasn't
official till July.
Later. Yeah, it was a couple months later. So it's like, and I think that if you're going to rush something, have it be moving the boxes, because moving day can be a nightmare, but you shouldn't rush to decide to get married.
I like this. Yes.
So that's the thing where a lot of the emotional pre-work was done. And again, that wasn't really, I was managing that less, but I was sending out a lot of emails and having to be very responsive to a lot of things like that.
So let me do a part B of this, because I think this is, as you're talking, I'm realizing you're coming at this as a leader, but not the pastor. Like, you are a staff member who is having to still manage emotions, trying to work with all these different bodies, but at the same time, you're like, guys, this is my 9-to-5 job. I'm not living and breathing you. So what was that like, trying to be a leader in that area?
I wasn't making a lot of decisions, but I was communicating things and trying to make sure various balls weren't being dropped. Mm-hmm. And I had to, try to be careful in my language, make sure that if someone sent a message, they they got responded to. At the time, I wouldn't have really considered myself a leader, but I was facilitating things a lot, and there was a lot of just interactions with people. People weren't coming to me with their worries, but I was very aware of what was going on.
And I'm guessing that you and the pastor had to be at least functioning pretty dang well in such a stressful.
Yes, and we were communicating a lot again, mostly remotely. Occasionally in the same room with a mask, but typically everything was asynchronous. So it's like, so if you have the privilege of merging when you can see each other face to face, that's probably better.
Yes. So let's building off of that. So what did you find? We're looking at kind of like a 6-month window, right? We started, I think both churches got serious about this conversation around February or March.
Yes.
A vote was taken in May, and a merger was, quote, official July 1. So there's that 6-month window where everything went to heck in a handbasket, and you are now becoming almost juggling both of these churches. So what was helpful? And at the same time, what made you go, oh, this frustrated me to no end?
I think I was here Monday and Friday, and then at university Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. So there were times when I didn't know if it was Friday or Monday, which confused people I was talking to. So keeping track of things, working at the university office as it was gradually emptying out was a challenge. You gradually realize it's just like, okay, what date is the printer leaving? That makes a difference in my workflow. What day is
I wouldn't even think about that.
leaving?
Yeah, I'd just be like, print this. Right. Wait, there's no printer?
It's like I can't print. The printer is gone. Yeah. we've ended our contract. All of that. Again, what was helpful, I would say, is the fact that because everyone was so involved in the process, leaders at both churches were very activated at that time, and it's just like, that happens at different phases, but it was not. There were lots of new committees just for the merger. There were different groups that had both people from both sides, but not both sides, but both churches working together to figure out, okay, what are we doing with all of the different objects in the building? There was a big sale, just like to get, like, once we decided, oh, we don't need, all of this kitchenware. If it had just been left to a handful of people to be like, okay, what's in the building of each church, what don't we need? Or if it was just, let's move everything from one church to the other, we would still be digging through it. We still have some, some
it is a church. There's always that one closet with who knows what still in it.
No, we still have a closet that's just all the old boom boxes.
The redundancy closet.
Yes. So, but just making sure that the redundancy wasn't everything was very helpful. And then just being able to try to keep track of writing as much as possible down about because it's like, where does this box go? And then you need it in a year.
Because you would be the one consistent. Like, we had all these volunteers and trying to honor, you are a volunteer, and in some sense it means you are the customer and I want to keep you happy. Right. But at the same time, you held it together, and I'm thinking just about that when someone's like, oh, we'll need this in 6 months. Here, Amy, figure out where we put this for the next, you had to keep it all moving in the right direction.
Some of that meant, okay, here's all these churches that we're giving away hymnals to, mail them. It's just having to mail 300 hymnals was fun, just hauling it in my car and getting that over. So there's, figuring out there's so much stuff. Where do you put it? What do you need? What do you not just want to get lost? You'd think that the digital merging would be easier, and in some cases it is. Sometimes it's just, well, we'll just keep this Google Drive for the old church running to this day. Maybe eventually we'll close it down, but it's free, so what are we going to do? But just with the church management software, you have different databases. They have different fields. You can't just blind put those together. You there's going to be some just either you're paying a company $1,000 to do it, or you're doing some stuff manually and having to decide what do you keep, what do you get rid of? Do you keep attendance for a Bible study that no longer exists from 2013? Mm-hmm. No. but it's like the address of someone who hasn't attended for a few years. Yeah. So just making sure you don't lose important data or waste your time on unimportant data.
And I would say that right there was, I think, the skill and gift, is that you allowed both pastors to say, I'm going to keep looking at the big picture of managing the emotions, the pastoral care, all of that, because you had the gift to be able to say, I can figure out when the contract on the printer is done here, and so you can still print it there. Like, that would have overwhelmed, I think, the pastors and leaders if there wasn't someone who could see that bigger picture and go, yeah, you know what, these two databases, you don't have two pastors spend 3 hours going through it. I can make some of these calls of, keep this, don't keep that. And that was a real gift, because I think it was so much more than just you're mailing hymnals, which is no small feat. But there was also you had to make some choices in that, and you could see from both of these, okay, in this particular setting, what do we need to make sure that ball doesn't get dropped? I like that.
And keeping things just keeping things a little longer than you think you need them, just in case. Making sure you have a backup. There is a really old computer that has some church Windows software from university on it that's just let's just keep this until till the wheels fall off. So just in case we need some old record from 2014 somehow.
How did you personally make that transition from all of that work? Now you're here in this building, you're downstairs, and people who are new come in and think, okay, you're in charge. What was helpful to you to make the repositioning?
Well, in some ways, just being part of the merger meant that I had to learn a lot. It's like if I was moving stuff somewhere, I had to figure out where does it go. There was to my understanding, Grace didn't have an office. Your office manager had been
we were
gone
in
for a while.
transition.
Yeah, so it's just you've been kind of with an interim person for a bit.
We knew that, okay, we were going to have to hire someone. And when the discussion of the merger came, we said, well, this is fantastic that we could have someone who helped with that continuity moving over. Yeah. What kind of misconceptions along with that would you say that,
No, I mean, it was a gradual process. It was very helpful that I'd worked at a different, Methodist church, even though I just learned also that, different places do things differently. They have different setups. I took on different, with the finance side of the job, I took on just a different part of the role than I had been playing at university. So which gave me a rounder understanding of the funds and just how fund accounting works and other fun things like that.
What didn't change for both churches? Those funds have no money in them. Yeah. But at least she understands a broader sense. Yeah, there's still no money there, but yeah.
Going through the merger and then going through the reopening after the shutdown from the pandemic is things were getting started again. So everyone was kind of figuring out how things go. And someone asked me a question, I'd be like, well, I don't know the answer. And then I learn it, and now I have it. So it was a real trial and error process. There were some people that were around who were able to talk me through things and train me on some stuff. But other times it was just digging through old files and seeing what exists.
So what proved to be frustrating once you got into the new setting, and not who, but
He's
what?
giving you a chance to say, so tell me about the new boss. So yeah, not necessarily who was frustrating, but you're if we had done this way, I may have cursed less, or
It's what is frustrating is I guess the ways in which things were different, but that's not necessarily a problem, but deciding, okay, which system worked better, or what was I really used to at university that just doesn't make sense for Grace?
You know what? I think right there, at least for me, explains kind of why this went so well, is that you came into this with an attitude of openness, that you were like, all right, I've got two systems here. Which one makes more sense because I know it? And that willingness to be like, all right, then we're going to do this one. Never in this, from at least Legacy Grace's end, did I ever feel you were like, it's this way or the highway. Right. There was always that openness and willingness to be like, yeah, people are going to come and ask me questions, and I'm not going to get mad at that. I'll figure out the answer and then tell them. That whole spirit of I can look at this bigger thing and realize, wow, this season is really hard and frustrating, and I know what part I can do to help it be successful. And I think you did that really well.
What misconceptions have people had about the job of church administrator that?
Oh yeah, this is a fun one. What do people always think that you're supposed to be? And you're like, that's not actually what I do.
It isn't entirely a catch-all job, but it's a multifaceted job. So the flexibility of my title, like my email address says secretary, and then my little name placard says office administrator, and then my job description says administrative and communications coordinator.
And nowhere in there does it mention, but you also do the finances, and you also do, some visioning and strategic goals with me. We've kind of alluded to, in my mind, why the merger worked well, especially from the administrative side, because it could have been a hot mess. So I think, using fried green tomatoes here, the secret in the sauce that made this work was your ability to be open, to be flexible, to kind of see that bigger picture. So my question would be, if you were to give advice, techniques, or tips to another person going through a merger who is in your role. So we're not talking the pastor, we're not talking volunteers, in terms of staff helping through any sort of big change, what would you say? I think this is why it went well for us.
No one is going to think of everything. If you have a lot of people involved and you give everyone enough time to plan ahead, to make a lot of lists of here's everything that we need to do between now and the end. Here's all of the different services that each church has. Not worship services, but just like internet, phone, whatever. Like what is still going to be operational at the old building if you're keeping the old building. Writing everything down if you can, because you are making a lot of decisions, you are taking in a lot of information, and you're probably not going to remember it all. And some of it may not be useful for another 12 months. So just write things down, give yourself enough time to plan ahead, and get help. So
all of those communications that came from you that you were so careful about made sure that you would bring any temperature down. Like if people start to get nervous or worried, with great power came great responsibility. You had the power to either inflame or calm, and being careful of that language. So if it's a pastor or someone on the leadership board, this is your chance. If you could say, hey, people in charge, remember this about the staff during a merger. Like if you could talk directly to one of them and say, please keep in mind, what advice would you give pastors or leadership boards in a merger?
as far as working with the staff, I would say just communication, having clear delegation of roles. We all just need to be a little patient with each other. And more broadly, if you're coming up on a merger vote, ideally you should know what the result will be before you have it.
I always think that's like the best advice. You never go into a meeting not knowing the outcome or you got issues.
Yeah, so just communicate as much as possible. It doesn't have to be 100%, but it should be close. It should, if it just like pretty close. You might have a couple naysayers, you might have someone voting no, just to make sure that you're counting the no votes.
Oh yeah.
Ideally, you want to have put in the work to get the buy-in so that it is just a moment of celebration and relief, and we're doing this.
I think that is exactly it. And I think that's why I will say again and again, you have always put in the time and the work. And so it really was a celebration, as opposed to now we're putting out more fires and stuff. Like doing the stuff, taking the time at the front end so that way there could be a chance to celebrate at the back end. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, you can be vacuuming at the 11th hour. You shouldn't be getting yes votes.
There we go. Yes. So thank you so much for coming on to our podcast. And I think for me, this was one of the most helpful ones, as well as maybe I need to go back and take some notes now about how to continue to be a good staff leader. And
it's good for clergy to have someone practical to talk to.
Absolutely, absolutely. So thank you so much for joining us for this episode.